Are you tired of doing investment research on stock markets? Want to spend time on your hobbies or go out with your friends instead? Introducing iCapital, where you can get independent, objective, and comprehensive investment advice on the go. Available in English and Mandarin and can be accessed via app, website, and print copy. We provide thorough, first-hand research-based findings on listed companies, economies, and stock markets, and clear perspective of how markets interact and how they influence investments, as well as provide Malaysian and global stock recommendations, stock portfolios with outstanding performance to follow. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. From only 49 ringgit a year, start investing like a fund manager. Subscribe now at www.icapital.biz.
Hi everyone, good morning. Teng Boo from Capital Dynamics again. 1 week has passed. In the last 1 week, markets have plunged, rebounded. Well, markets have been very volatile. But today, our topic is about something more long-term, not week to week, month to month. We're talking about many years, many decades. And it is something that I think every Malaysian should think about seriously, because while we focus a lot on financial literacy, that means how to invest, how to save, what has been neglected, sadly, in Malaysia by the ordinary Malaysian, by the government, by the institution is economic literacy. You don't have to understand economics at the professor level or at the PhD level, but you must at least be able to understand basic economic principles. And from my observation, economic literacy amongst Malaysians, not just the ordinary people, but among the policymakers, among Malaysian politicians, is very, very, very low. That is bad. That is dangerous for the country as a whole. So today's topic is about KL Singapore high-speed rail, which we talk about in May this year, and the high-speed rail versus Malaysia's Semiconductor Design Park, which was launched just a few days ago. This is an extremely important subject matter because it is not just about the high-speed rail versus the design park. It is about the differences between achieving economic growth and economic development. There are huge differences between achieving GDP growth and achieving economic development. Like I said, this involves economic literacy. Based on our May YouTube video on the KL Singapore high-speed rail, based on the comments that we received, I can safely say that a majority of the comments came from people who do not understand the fundamental differences between GDP growth and economic development. Because if you don't understand the differences between these two projects, which we are using as a case study, then you would make the wrong decision and say that I would prefer the high-speed rail project. The high-speed rail connection between KL and Singapore is better for Malaysia. No, that is the wrong answer. The project which is better for the whole country in terms of sustainable growth, in terms of overcoming the very dreaded middle income trap, is the Malaysia IC Design Park or the Malaysia Semiconductor Design Park. Why is that so? So, be patient, it's going to be, I got to go through a few things to explain what are the differences and why the design park is something that I've been waiting for a long, long time. Something that has to be really, really welcome. And we hope that this is not the last of the semiconductor design park. We hope there are more of it, or more projects of that type, of that nature. So, for those of you who are interested, let me just show you. First thing is to show you the second quarter GDP growth for Malaysia, 2024, 5.8%. That is impressive, especially in a period which has been marked with a lot of uncertainties. And it's definitely beyond expectations of most economists. But if you look at the next diagram, Malaysia has been trailing. We are behind South Korea and Taiwan in terms of GDP per capita. Now, as I mentioned in my past videos, you cannot just look at GDP growth because that is distorted by things like population age, population number, and so on. Whereas GDP per capita, it's about the GDP per person. That is more accurate. So when you take GDP per capita in US dollar terms, you'll find that in 1980, Malaysia, South Korea, and Taiwan, we put them on the same level. We are more or less at about the same level with some differences. 1980 is about 43 years ago. Now, you look at 2023, or if you don't look at 2023 because it's just a projection, you look at 2022. GDP per capita for South Korea and Taiwan are way ahead of Malaysia, about 3 times. Is that because our GDP growth has been slower? This is where we come to a fundamental topic called economic development. Now, let's go into more detail as to what this is all about. As you probably have read, or you may not have read because most of our newspapers, most of our mass media did not make this into the most important headline. If I were in charge of the mass media, I would say that this is one of the most important news for Malaysia in a very long time. The launch of Malaysia's Semiconductor Design Park in Puchong. Actually, there's no need to say Malaysia Semiconductor IC Design because IC is a semiconductor. So we could have shortened it to say Malaysia IC Design Park. Right? Now, what is this? It is about 0.6 hectare. No big deal. It is not like Cyberjaya. It is not like a huge type of infrastructure project, right? Now, it is set up in collaboration with federal government, local and semiconductor firms, venture capitalists, and so on. And it is designed, this design park is meant to house more than 400 semiconductor design engineers from local, international, and joint venture design companies. The anchor tenants would be companies like MyStorage. For those of you who are not familiar with MyStorage, it's going to be backed by Phison. Phison is the company that founded UBS. It was started by a Malaysian Chinese who moved to Taiwan. So MyStorage will be backed by Phison and Mr. Pua, the CEO and founder. Skychip. Most of you will not have heard of Skychip, but it is one of Malaysia's leading IC design companies based in Penang. And the company has got a lot of design engineers inside them. And this is not manufacturing, this is design. VRock, it is actually based in France, the company, but started by a Malaysian who is going to be an anchor tenant, and so on and so forth. Now this is the local anchor tenants. Then we look at the other players. These are some of them, like ARM. ARM probably you would have heard, is a very famous design house based in UK. And you have Cadence, Synopsys, Siemens EDA. These are, at a global level, there are only 3 leading EDA firms: Cadence, Synopsys, and Siemens. Siemens EDA took over Mentor Graphics and then became Siemens EDA. These are the 3 top EDA firms, and they are very important in the semiconductor supply chain. Without them, a lot of things, these are not manufacturers, these are design houses. But it involves a lot of software, a lot of programming. And for those of you who are not familiar, the CEO of Cadence used to be a Malaysian Chinese, Teng Boo, whom I first met about 32, 33 years ago in Kuala Lumpur. And the rest probably you know, Keysight and then the Shenzhen Semiconductor Association. So these are important partners, local and international. These are people who know designing, which means that the design park most likely would have a good chance of being successful. Now, the people who are inside this design park are going to recruit engineers, electronics engineer, mechanical engineer, mechatronics, computer science, and so on. As you can see, the starting degree for these engineers are at the higher end, 5,000 to 6,000. And those with masters or PhD can earn up to 7,000. For those of you who are not familiar, who are not aware, Capital Dynamics is also recruiting this type of engineers, this type of computer scientists, masters and PhD. We are offering salaries up to 10,000 ringgit or even more. So if you have people, your son, your daughters, friends, fresh graduate or experienced people who want to join Capital Dynamics with engineering background, with computer science background, with mathematics background, we love to recruit these people. Anyway, coming back to the design park. So you can see the type of people they're recruiting are high wage, high skill. Not your person who is going to fry your char kway teow, not a person who is going to dig up all the roads, dig up all the earth, not the low skill, low wage type. That is already telling you a major difference between achieving economic growth and economic development. So for example, just to show you the types of engineers that are needed for semiconductor design and advanced packaging. I'm just sharing with you just the design engineers. These are all people, ideally, they would prefer people with masters or PhD, ideally. Because if you're just at a bachelor's degree, you probably have a lot of things to catch up. And what the Menteri Besar of Selangor said is totally correct. This project, that means the design park, is not just about infrastructure, because 0.6 hectare is small. It's nothing compared with the Cyberjaya, it's nothing compared with your KL Twin Towers and all those things, right? And more importantly is what our economy minister, Rafizi Ramli, said. He says, between putting one highway in Klang Valley, I would prefer to put a few billion ringgit into more IC design parks. My goodness, when I read this, it's like fresh air. Suddenly there's fresh air coming into Malaysia atmosphere. We need this type of policy. We need this type of direction for the Malaysian economy. Economic development, because that will solve a lot of problems that we face now. It will solve our traffic jam, it will solve our ridiculous water disruption, it will solve the problem of having to rely and suffer many of the consequences arising from having too many low-skilled, low-wage foreign workers, and so on. So if you cannot see the linkage between having more IC Design Park and the consequences and the results that I just mentioned, then you have not understood the difference between economic growth and economic development. Fear not. Let me just share with you what this is all about. Over the years, I can remember as far back as 7 years, 8, 9 years ago, I have repeatedly advised the Malaysian government through our iCapital publication, not just to focus on GDP growth, but to focus more on economic development, right? The only way for Malaysia to overcome the middle income level, the only way, there's no other way, is to focus on economic development and not GDP growth. Now, let me go further. At the present stage of Malaysia's economic progress, if you build more highways, more skyscrapers, I can guarantee you Malaysia will be trapped at the middle income level forever. We need high value add, high skill projects like the IC Design Park. Right? So, when you have the knowledgeable, competent design houses locally and overseas joining together, I think we have good chance of success. And economic growth very often is linked with corruption, because you need to have a lot of approval for skyscrapers, approval of contracts for flyovers, and so on. Whereas development is not lucrative. Development doesn't involve huge money. Like, for example, the amount that WeRock is going to invest in their Malaysian design office in the Puchong Center, it's only about 20 million ringgit. How much corruption can there be? And look, most of the money is not going to be spent on construction. So, development for countries, for emerging countries that are serious about achieving a developed economic status, you have to forego the typical GDP growth type, which is for example, a classic example is the KL Singapore high-speed rail. Now, we have advised way back in 2016, right, that we don't take the right path, we're going to be stuck in the middle income trap. We wrote further, right, economic growth is a very narrow concept. It only measures increase in your real or nominal GDP. That's it. Development, economic development, looks at the actual living standards and how people are actually affected. Measures of economic development will include levels of literacy, education standards, levels of healthcare, quality and availability of housing, levels of environmental standards, and so on. Economic development involves a complex process, and it is multi-dimensional. The concept is multi-dimensional. It is possible. In fact, it happens in many countries where they enjoy economic growth without development, which Malaysia has been experiencing since the last 40, 50 years. Take an example, India. India in recent years, GDP growth has been tremendous, 7%, 8%. But why did Narendra Modi lose the majority in the recent election? Because India's GDP, high GDP growth, which a lot of the Western media focuses on, the benefits of those growth have not flowed down to the majority of the Indians. The unemployment rate in India is high. The youth unemployment rate in India is 45%. What is the point of having 7-8% GDP growth when 45% of your youth cannot find a job? Because Narendra Modi has neglected economic development. So Malaysia has made the same mistake for the last 40-50 years. Take the case of China. China is the opposite. China in the last 10-15 years has been saying, look, we are not obsessed with your 7% GDP growth anymore. We are obsessed with quality development. But somehow, until recently, very recently, so that's why when Rafizi Ramli made that statement, oh my goodness, for once, we get sensible policies. Because we have Malaysia and Malaysians have been obsessed with achieving physical GDP growth, which is what the KL-Singapore high-speed rail is all about. Now, that is the reason why Malaysia still desperately needs 1.5 million Bangladeshi workers. This was written in 2016 in our iCapital. Why many Malaysian companies, businesses, employers wrongfully are asking for more and more low-skilled, low-wage foreign workers. They don't realize that you're killing the country. The example of the KL-Singapore high-speed rail versus Malaysia IC Design Park is an excellent example to use to explain the differences between economic growth and development. Economic growth does not automatically translate into development, right? And as I've said, economic development includes human development and growth. Economic growth, for example, may benefit only a small percentage of the population, right? And the rest of the people may not benefit. Corruption. The country may see higher GDP, but the benefits of the GDP growth or the economic growth will be siphoned off into the bank accounts of the politicians and their cronies. So, I mean, the example of this can be seen in so many developing countries, whether it's India, whether it's Philippines, and so on. The same tragic consequences are repeated. So look at Malaysia, right? Construction. To have high GDP growth is very simple. I've explained this in my past videos. Build more skyscrapers, build more highways, build more flyovers, build the KL-Singapore high-speed rail. Then your GDP growth will look good. But if you look at our country, one source of corruption, one easy source of corruption is the construction sector. That is where, there's not much transparency. This project costs 1 billion, this project costs 3 billion. How do we know that that is actually what it should be costed at? So you see, MACC recently has been going after the highway concession, the construction sector and so on. Because from the way I look at it, if it is not managed properly, if it is not regulated properly, the construction sector of any country is the source of corruption. And it's not just that, it's also an environmental problem. Because if you focus on real GDP, and you ignore regulations, you ignore enforcement, you ignore accountability, it will lead to environmental and health problems, which will mean that your living standards, your quality of your life declines. You live in Malaysia, we have so many instances where water supply got some funny chemicals and so on and so forth. It happens so frequently because we are focusing on GDP growth instead of development, instead of economic development, quality development. Traffic jam, congestion, right? All of you know it's huge, it's massive, it's going to get worse. KL, the Klang Valley, the population is 8.8 million. I've done extrapolation before. Over the next 5-10 years, the population in this area of Malaysia is going to be like double to 16, 17, 18 million. My goodness, if you don't solve this problem, right? Urban planning, town planning, corruption in awarding of contracts, the traffic jams are going to get worse. The floodings are going to get worse. So what is the point of having high GDP growth when your quality of life is worsening? Like I always explain to many people, whether the GDP growth is growing at 3% or 7%, the ordinary Malaysian doesn't know, doesn't care. But what matters to them is when I drive to work, especially in the urban areas like Penang, Georgetown, in KL, in Malacca, Johor Bahru, does it take me 1 to 2 hours to get to the office? And then when it rains, I get trapped in a flash flood. That is what matters to them. So our focus, our policy focus must be in the right direction. I just show you, this is pictures way back in 2016 when they were, the DBKL Malaysian government was finally realized that they need to build pavements around our office area, around Chinatown, when they decided that, the roads there got to be improved, right? As they were constructing the pavements and so on, you can see the whole thing is, it's not properly managed. And if you look at projects like Pavilion or PNB 118, those kind of projects, the construction of those projects takes so many years. And if your construction is not properly managed for that many years, the ordinary Malaysian have to suffer. And then when they're completed, you have to suffer from traffic jam, illegal parking on pavements. So this is obsessing with GDP growth and not about development. Contrast that with, it's the same time, same year in Sydney when they were building their tram in through Sydney. You can see in the construction, in the process, everything has been organized, orderly, tidy, in a tidy manner, and non-disruptive for the ordinary people. That is what development is all about. So, the reason, one of the main reasons why I strongly recommend that the Malaysian government abandon, at least for now, the KL Singapore Highway is because we must focus on economic development. And by focusing on improving domestic connectivity between KL, Ipoh, Penang, KL, Johor Bahru, KL, Kuantan, through good quality, frequent high-speed train, that is the correct approach. That is the correct priority, because that will lead to better quality of life for ordinary Malaysians. This is what I presented in May, right? That it will be a disaster for Malaysia, the country as a whole. Don't look at it from your own narrow point of view. Look at it from the national country, the national interest. You have a project where you need a lot of low-skilled, low-wage foreign workers for the construction. On the other hand, for the Malaysia IC Design Park, 60,000 square feet. How many workers do you need? Probably can be completed in the short time. It was completed in a short time, and it doesn't require billions and billions. And more importantly, the output. When this design park starts functioning, it will be able to create cheap design. which will lead to high-value semiconductor manufacturing. Isn't that what development is supposed to be? Take a look at the rest of the country, right? If you just keep focusing on economic growth, you have socio-economic inequality between the Klang Valley and Terengganu, between Penang and Kelantan. You have regional disparity. You have disparity between different parts of Malaysia, which unfortunately coincides with and is associated with cultural differences, religious differences, and that will lead to political differences, which is unnecessary. The famous Nobel Prize winner, the famous economics Nobel Prize winner, Amartya Sen says, economic growth is only one aspect of economic development. Economic growth without investment in human development is unsustainable and unethical. I can't agree more with him, right? I mean, he knows economics very well. So it's important to learn from people like him. So we would encourage the Malaysian government to seriously look into the economy destruction process of building more skyscrapers, those apartments which create more problems than solving our problems, more highways, more flyovers, and more unnecessary infrastructure, and to have more and more low-skilled foreign workers. Stop that. Stop this journey. It can be done. Countries like Singapore has done it. Countries like China has done it. And Malaysia, under the current government, can do it because they're moving in the right direction. Let's have more projects like the IC Design Park. Let's have more of that. Then I can guarantee you 5, 10, 20 years from now, Malaysia will be a globally successful economy. I can guarantee you that. So, my advice to our Prime Minister is that focusing on economic development is reforming the economy. It's as simple as that. I hope you enjoy it. Please share it. Give your comments. Whether you agree with me, you don't agree with me, it's okay, because from your comments I can judge as to how I should produce my future videos. Like it, and more importantly, if you have not subscribed to Capital Dynamics YouTube channel, please do. Right? And for those of you who are interested to understand how, China's GDP per capita is at about the same level as Malaysia, about 13,000 US dollars, right? But why is it that China can send their spaceship to the other side of the moon? Why is it that China can be a global leader in electric vehicles, smartphones? Why is it that China can build their own aircraft carrier with modern technology inside, which only America has? And yet Malaysia, at the same level of GDP per capita, we are so far behind. Why? If you want to understand how China has succeeded and what China will be like, come to my talk on Saturday, 7 September at KLCC. Right? It's a whole day talk just to explain to you what the heck is going on in China, what the heck China is doing, and why China in the coming decades will be the most successful country the world has ever seen. With that, I hope that you have a good weekend and your productive week ahead. Thank you very much.